Okay, so we are starting in line 416 here, and we are going into a simile again, which is introduced this time by this little word keu, which is it's just like welut actually, or weluti. It means just as. And then you have another word here, quondam, which means sometimes. So I would put those together, keu quondam, just as sometimes. And then we have an ablative absolute. So you've got your ablative noun turbine, and then your ablative PPP, perfect passive participle, rupto. So with a hurricane, turbine, having been broken, literally, rupto, or you could say having burst forth. So just as sometimes, with a hurricane having burst forth, and then the subject is adversi venti. So adversi meaning diverse or clashing or against each other, and venti are winds. So diverse winds, and then the main verb is confligunt, which means they clash. So just as sometimes, with a hurricane having burst forth, diverse winds clash. And then we're told what winds these are. So these are Zephyrus, which is the west wind. And then you've got these ques here, Q-U-E, meaning and. So the west wind, and the notus, notus with a short O. Notus is the south wind. And then also Eurus on the next line, that's the east wind. So west and south and east. And the east wind is described as Laetus, so happy. And the east wind is happy with something, because we then get an ablative phrase, which is Aeois equis. Okay, so just notice a couple of things there. Aeois is 3 different syllables. So short E, and then long O and long I. So Aeois. And Aeois means eastern, and equis, ablative plural, is horses. Okay, so west and south and east, happy with his eastern horses, and then we get in the next phrase after the semicolon, the new subject is silvae, so the forests, and the main verb is stridunt, they groan, so the forests groan, and quae. And then we have a new subject, which is spumeus nereus. Nereus with a long E, or nereus if you like. So foaming nereus, spumeus nereus. And then the main verb is rages, so siwit in the previous line. Foaming Nereus rages with his trident. So tridenti is ablative case. He rages with his trident. Nereus is a kind of sea god, by the way. Not the same as Neptune, but a kind of old man of the sea figure. So foaming Nereus rages with his trident. And, atque, he stirs, that's kiet, he stirs the seas, aequora. This Latin word aequor is related to the word aequus, meaning equal. The adjective aequus, meaning equal. So it means something flat. So it could be a plain, like a stretch of flat land, or it could be the sea, because the sea is also kind of flat. So it's here, it's a synonym of Maria, right? It means the seas. And then, so aequora is the object of kiet, and then you've got fundo, which is ablative, and here the ablative means from, so fundo means from their depth. And in fact, there's an adjective agreeing with fundo, which is emo, that means lowest, so from their lowest depth. So just to go through that little bit again. So the forests groan, and foaming Nereus rages with his trident, and stirs the seas from their lowest depth. And then we get, at the beginning of line 420, we get the word illi, meaning those or they, and And what this pronoun does, we've seen this quite a few times. It switches the subject to somebody else. It's like suddenly shifting the camera, moving the camera in a new direction in a film. So this is basically pulling us out of the simile and bringing us back to the battlefield at Troy. So illi etiam, those also. Now, si quos means whom here. The si doesn't really add that much to the meaning. It's a bit like saying if anyone, but basically I would just translate si quos as whom. Those also whom. And then you have an ablative phrase, obscura nocte, meaning in the dark night. This is a kind of ablative time when, if you like. So those also, whom in the dark night, and quos you can see as accusative, so it's the object, and it's the object of this main verb, fudimus, meaning we routed. So those also, whom in the dark night we routed, per umbram, per plus accusative, through the shade, with a trick, insidiis. So that's ablative plural, although we might translate it as singular, with a trick. This is the trick of disguising themselves with Greek armour. So those also, whom in the dark night we routed through the shade with a trick, and quae hunted, agitavimus, right? We hunted, perfect tense. And then you've got another ablative phrase, tota urbe, in the whole city. Right? We have to imagine the preposition in before that. We could actually say sort of throughout the whole city, because that's the idea. They're hunting them everywhere in the city. And then finally, we get the main verb apparent, which means they appear. So in other words, what's happening is you've got lots of chaotic fighting in the night. Nobody can really see anything. But then now the sun is starting to come up, I suppose. And so, the Trojans can actually start to see these Greeks who they've been hunting during the night, right? The Greeks actually appear. So that's what's happening. So just to go through this again very quickly. So those also whom in the dark night we routed through the shade with a trick and hunted, there it is, and hunted throughout the whole city, appear, right? So apparent is the verb that goes with the subject, illi, back at the beginning of the sentence. Right. So then, after the semicolon, we go on, primi, they first, and then the main verb is agnoscunt, they first recognize, and then the object is klipeos, our shields, and quae, our deceiving weapons, mentita tela. Now, this verb mentita, this literally means having deceived. It's a PAP, perfect active participle, from a deponent verb. But I think the idea is basically deceiving weapons. In other words, these are weapons which are lying because they are weapons which look Greek but are actually disguising Trojans. So they first recognize our shields and our deceiving weapons, and atque they mark, signant, or in other words, they identify our ora, literally our mouths, but you could say our speech, as discordia, different, in sound, sono. So sono there is ablative case. So they first recognize our shields and deceiving weapons and mark our speech as different in sound. Okay, so in other words, what's happening here is that the Greeks, now that things are a little bit clearer maybe, the Greeks are starting to realize that there's a contrast here, or something weird here, because they're looking at Greek armor, but what they're hearing is Trojan voices. So they now realize that this is a trick, and these are actually Trojans just dressed up. as Greeks. Okay, then next sentence, ilicet means immediately. So it's another synonym of statim or protinus, immediately, and then a passive verb, obruemur, we are overpowered in number, numero, ablative case. So in other words, we, the Trojans, are outnumbered. And quer, first, primus, Coroibus, we've met him before. He's one of Aeneas's fellow Trojans. Coroibus, and then the main verb is procumbit here. He falls by the right hand. So dextra is ablative case. He falls by the right hand of Peneleus. So Penelei is genitive case. He falls by the right hand of Peneleus. Where? Ad aram. Now remember, ad plus accusative usually means towards, but in this instance, he might fall towards the altar, but I think this is just telling us where he fell. So he falls by the right hand of Peneleus, by the altar, ad aram, of the, and here we have a genitive phrase, dy armipotentis. Now, dy is a goddess, just like Dea, and armipotens means literally strong in weapons. So we might just say of the warrior goddess. So and first, Coroibus falls by the right hand of Peneleus, by the altar of the warrior goddess. And then after the semicolon, we have Rippeus, right? Et, and et here means perhaps also, right? So Rippeus also, or Rippeus too, cadit, falls. And then we get a little description of Rippeus. He's described as the justissimus unus. Now, justissimus is a superlative adjective, so he is the most just one. Qui fuit, who was, in Teucris, in the Trojans, or in better English, among the Trojans. The Teucrians and the Trojans, these are the same people. So the most just one who was among the Trojans, and now we have another superlative adjective, servantissimus, most protecting of justice. So aequi is a genitive case, is in the genitive case there. So Rippeus too falls, the most just one who was among the Teucrians and most protecting of justice. And then we have a little comment from the narrator in brackets. Now, visum is short for visum est, right? It seemed, aliter, otherwise, to the gods, dis, dative plural of deus. It seemed otherwise to the gods. Or you could say the gods decided otherwise, right? In other words, yes, Rippeus was very just, very protecting of justice, he was a great guy, but the gods decided to kill him anyway, basically, or decided that he should be killed anyway. Okay, then we go after the semicolon, we've got two new subjects, Hippanis and Dimas, right? So Hippanis and Dimas, the main verb is pereunt, they perish. And then we have a PPP, perfect passive participle, confixi, which means having been pierced. And they have been pierced, ar sociis, ar plus ablative, meaning by allies. So Hippanis and Dimas perish, pierced by allies. And then we get another semicolon, and then nec, meaning nor. So nor did tua plurima pietas, your very great dutifulness, right? So plurima, remember plurima is stronger than multa. It's the superlative form. So it's not just great, it's very great. And then pietas means dutifulness. It's more than piety in English, because piety in English is about religion, whereas pietas in Latin is about the gods, but it's also about your duty to your family and to your home, your city, your country, that kind of thing. So, nor did your very great dutifulness, and then panthu is the vocative case of panthus. So, our narrator Aeneas is addressing Panthus in his speech here. Nor did your very great dutifulness, Panthus, nor the infula, the woolen band of Apollo, so Apollinis is the genitive of Apollo, nor did the wool band of Apollo protect, texit, that's the main verb, nor did it protect you, so te is the accusative object here, nor did it protect you falling, labentem. So labentem is a present participle, which you can recognize from the nt in the middle, and it's agreeing with te. So just to go through that phrase again, nor did your very great dutifulness, Panthus, nor Apollo's wool band protect you as you fell. Okay, so we end there with this verb takes it, protect, which is the one that kind of the one that has plurima pietas as its subject, and then te with labentem as the object.